is that thinking is cheap, so think more. As an engineer, I always have this, urge or the itch to build something technologically which is cool and innovative and next level. You have to focus on delivering value to your customers. If profits were to happen, product has to be in place. Fundamentally, if the models can reason, you are basically commoditizing intelligence.
Correct.
And it just unlocks infinite possibilities. I wouldn't say the problem of infinite context is solved yet. I don't think anyone has solved, right? So it comes down to, again, product-centric thinking in order to have this robust and accurate form of retrieval.
Most overhyped tech trend.
I think the most overhyped is also the most useful. It's the AI agents.
Hi, today we have Aryan, co-founder CTO of Neosapien with us. Welcome to the podcast, Aryan.
Thanks, Jita. I'm excited to be here and, of course, humbled to be in your presence and be here on this podcast.
Oh, no. My pleasure talking to you. It has been fun so far. I think the recording was delayed because we were talking.
Yeah.
I want to learn about your journey from college to starting Neosapien. I'm very curious to know what all happened.
Yeah, so basically starting from college, right? So I graduated from IIT Madras in 2021. Basically studied this branch called engineering design. So it's a culmination of electronics. You learn a little bit of mechanical, a little bit of computer science, and there is product development as well. So my love for building hardware product as such, it came out of my college degree while I was there at IIT Madras. While I was there, of course, I was not a great student. I was not a bad student either. I was more of a, kind of like a good enough student. Most of my time it was just spent in playing football and reading books. I have been obsessively reading these philosophical and non-fiction books ever since college. And I think that has had single-handedly the most impact in my thought process and my mindset development till now. Because so I have been into reading Buddhist and Vedantic literature.
Yeah.
Right, and what they essentially teach you is, in a way, you become more resilient, right?
Okay.
And that is the most helpful meta skill which I have as a CTO and as a co-founder as well, because you would know in startups there are so many things which can go wrong, and one of the best advice I have heard from one of my mentors is that you just have to keep going. If you stop, then of course it's all over.
Yeah.
So I've been into that, and I've worked as an AI researcher at Siemens Technologies, basically building AI models from scratch, architectures also from scratch. And yeah, this is my second startup actually. Previous to this, I was building a startup called Square Feet 51.
Okay.
So it was a PropTech startup. We were building AI Copilot for architects, right? And the problem we were trying to solve over there was that architecture is expensive for the end customers. So I'm from a tier 2 city, Indore. And what people do over there is they get their homes designed by, civil engineers because they just cannot afford architects. So we were solving that problem. But while I was involved in that, I worked on that for around 6-7 months. I ended up realizing that I was not deeply enthusiastic about the problem which we were solving because I never faced that personally.
Yeah.
And this was about the time when ChatGPT had just come in, right? And because I had always been into AI, that kind of, gave me a glimpse of what is possible in future.
Yeah.
Because now you have a tool which is intelligence.
Yes.
And suddenly intelligence has become commoditized. Previous to that, it was just all hard-coded logic.
Correct.
Now we have come down to non-deterministic systems on which you don't know how they are going to work and so on.
Yeah.
So I left that and that startup, and I started Neosapien with my brother, Dhananjay, who is also our CEO. And the reason behind why we started Neosapien is because we fundamentally realize that we are right now standing in a paradigm shift. And
Very much.
and that paradigm shift has to do with majorly just one thing, right? And that one thing is that the amount of information which is being generated and being consumed by people, that has increased significantly.
Yes.
And what that amount of information does is that it kind of overloads your brain. And of course, our brain is a beautiful organ within within our body, right? But it's just not meant to be consuming this much amount of information and to make sense of it.
Mm-hmm.
So what we ended up realizing is that we need to help people make sense of this information which they are getting.
Okay.
So the idea of Neosapien was just to become a filter between humans and the information which they are consuming, so that we can help people make sense of this information. So when we started this, the vision was simple. The vision was that we have to solve a problem fundamentally, and that problem was that people forget things.
Yeah.
And so we started Neosapien with the vision to make people become superhumans, and that is where the name Neosapien also comes. Neosapien stands for new race of humans in a way, right? And yeah, so how do you make people superhuman? So we realize, okay, we cannot just have this n number of abilities at once.
Yeah.
We thought, okay, from first principles, what is it that people are struggling with the most?
Yes.
We realized it was just the memory. And what memory? It had to do with memory of the conversations which people are having. So we ended up interviewing a lot of people in our network, and most of these people just happened to be startup founders. So for them, the problem was they have a lot of these in-person conversations,
Yes.
which are mostly unplanned, right? For example, if we met downstairs, it would not be planned.
Yeah.
Of course, you can have these note takers in virtual environment when the conversations are planned.
Correct.
But a lot of these informations which come from your unplanned conversations, they are lost.
Yes.
Right? So we ended up ideating on how we can solve for that. And that is why we have this device, which is a physical
Very
product
tiny.
as such. Yeah. Lot of pain and suffering has gone into making this thing happen. But yeah, why we have this physical device also is because you would understand that form is as important as function. मान लो आप road पर जा रहे हो, right? If you have to travel from here to, let's just say, Indira Nagar, you can travel by scooter, you can travel by bike, bus, and so on. But of course, the form in which you go to Indira Nagar, whether you choose bike or car, it depends on what you want to accomplish. If you want to go there faster, if it's a busy road, maybe you will take a bike.
Yeah.
If you want to, get there comfortably, you will take a car. So similarly, in our case, we ended up realizing that having a phone app would just create too much of a friction.
Yeah.
Because people would have to remember that they have to turn it on and off. And so we wanted it to be more of an ambient computing device. Now people do not have to worry about, recording it and turning it on and off. It's just there.
Yeah.
Like think of it like your shadow, which is just there. And so, yeah, we have been on this journey for past 14 months. And we have launched about 2 months back. And by God's grace, it's going well so far.
Super, super. I want to quickly ask you. You said you read a lot of books, and I also looked at your LinkedIn. Like I did some social stalking, like people do. The choices of books and genre are completely different from most people that I talk to. How did you kind of get started on reading Buddhistic or Vedantic literature?
Yeah. So
if I'm saying it right.
Yeah. I mean, so I have, ever since I can remember, so I have been into, reading since my school days as such. And back then, so I'll tell you the evolution on how my genres changed over a period of time. So when I was in school, so I have always been a very ambitious kind of a person. Like I've always wanted to, be this main character of my own story and create a story which is worth telling. Right, that is something which I've always wanted. So back in school, I used to read these books like the personal MBA and stuff like that, which could help me build businesses.
I almost was about to say comic books. I had Super Commando Dhruv in mind, but yeah, personal MBA books.
Yeah, I have never been into comic books, but I used to watch a lot of anime back in the day.
Oh,
yeah, a lot more than I would like to admit, actually. But yeah, other than that, so in anime, of course, you will always have this main character, and this main character, of course, goes through this journey which is called as the hero's
journey, yeah.
right? Wherein they start off from one place, they overcome a problem, and then they share their story with the world, and then the world rejoices, and you also rejoice along with the world because you have just overcome such a big struggle in your life. But back in the day, I think my thought process was just that if I could just make a lot of money and be famous, at least during my school time, I think that was my one singular aim.
Right.
And then I used to search these blogs on how do you become a CEO of a company and so on.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, so I started reading these books which were way beyond, my age. But while I was reading those books, I just could not relate with them, right? For example, I have never worked in a team of engineers, so I could not relate as to what these MBA books were trying to teach me. It was just an information dump. But what ended up happening is that when I entered college, suddenly you are in IIT and you get humbled by all these
Big time. Yeah.
big time. Because in school, you're basically the topper, right? And then you go to IIT and you just become another average student. So I ended up having some form of psychological struggles when I reached college. Mainly just I spent my time in playing football. And what ended up happening is that suddenly your perception of yourself, it changes from being this very smart person to just being someone just good enough, and then you are being humbled by your own classmates. There have been times wherein the prof is teaching something and it doesn't make sense. Like, he is teaching some algorithm to us, and between the first and the second line you have no idea how he reached from first to second, and then there is someone sitting right beside you. He has already gone to the fifth step, and he's like, boss, how do you not know about this? So you get humbled and you also start getting this kind of peer pressure that people are doing just so well in their lives in college. And what ended up happening is that it ended up creating a lot of this anxiety, and there was some form of, I would not say major, but some mild form of sadness and depression as well inside me. And mostly it was this anxiety of not being able to meet my own standards of what I had for myself and the dreams I had, right? So I end up thinking, again from first principles, that if I'm so smart, then why am I unhappy to begin with, right? I should just
Very
be able to
clever,
think
by the way.
myself out of it. So then I, with any other problem, I started researching about it. What do I do? So I remember the first thing which I typed on Google is that I'm struggling in life. I'm suffering. What should I do? And I remember that the first blog which came up, it had to do with the 4 Noble Truths of Buddha. And that is where my journey started from. So yeah, fundamentally there is suffering. And Buddha said that there is suffering, and there is a cause of suffering, which is desires. There is an end to suffering, and there is a path towards ending that suffering. I just went very deep inside that rabbit hole, and it just ended up being the most important concept which I have ever come across. And to summarize that one concept in just one line, that concept is that everything is interrelated. And because everything is interrelated, there are no separate entities. We are all but a part of this one cosmic interrelated universe. So there is no, so this ego which you feel that I am Aryan, I'm the co-founder, I'm the CTO, and these are my problems. When you dive deeper into it, it just comes out to be nothing but an illusion. And yeah, that basically brought me out of this anxiety, because I could just detach with my thoughts, because at the end of the day, anxiety is nothing but it's a repetitive pattern of thoughts which you have in your head.
Okay.
So I could just at any given point in time look at my thoughts and be like, okay, this is like a cloud, right, in the sky. It has come and it will go, and it is autonomous. It just became a habit, and that anxiety ended up translating or transforming into more of joy in a way. So yeah, I mean, I do recommend Buddhist literature to a lot of people, and I do have this tattoo also. If you see,
Okay.
this is
What does this mean?
so it's a symbol of Zen Buddhism. It's an Enso circle. So what it says is basically you can only make this perfect circle if you're entirely in the moment. And what ends up happening, for example, you are also a coder, right? At heart, an engineer. So you would realize that there are these certain times when you are just into it and into the flow.
Yeah.
You forget the world around you and you are entirely into the moment. And you would also realize that when you are entirely into the moment, suffering itself just disappears, right? And same lesson I've just integrated in my life. Whenever my thoughts kind of play games with me, I just tell myself that it has come, it will go on their own accord, and I just have to let it be. So
Very interesting. Given that you are working on sort of memory-related problem, and you also believe in the single organism,
yeah.
does Gaia or a future possibility of Gaia, if I am pronouncing it right, comes to your mind? Is that something that Neosapien want to get to too?
So our vision single-handedly remains this, right? We want to optimize human potential, right? And we are going to start off with optimizing the mental potential of humans. And even in that, we have picked up a very niche problem statement of optimizing memory as such. But given that, I do believe that I do believe on a fundamental level, everything is interconnected. And at the end of the day, if there is an AI also like Gaia, which has the information of the entire universe, I think something like that should be possible. But then again, there is this very famous researcher by the name of Stephen Wolfram. If
Yeah,
you
of course, everybody knows.
yeah.
MATLAB, dude.
Yes, MATLAB, right? And so Stephen Wolfram has this theory of computational irreducibility. It basically just means that the universe is not deterministic in a way. So you cannot predict the next thing which the universe is going to do, because it's just so much of such a complex system. And in order to compute that, you would need a system which is much more complex than the universe itself. So while this theory exists, I also do have this fundamental belief in my mind that anything is possible. Which is what keeps us also pushing. So yeah, Gaia, something like that, I think it should be possible, even if I don't know whether it is possible or not.
Okay. I'm curious, you said if you want to solve a problem, you go and do your research. What is your approach to one, problem solving and learning new things today?
So I have recently talked about this very same idea to a lot of people.
Okay.
So just to give you a quick context, I think we talked about it before the podcast. We operate out of here at Scaler Labs because we are incubated with Scaler. So a lot of business school and tech school students, they come and ask me about the specific problems which they are facing.
Yeah.
And the only one thing which I have to tell them is that thinking is cheap, so think more.
Thinking is cheap. Cool.
So, there is in AI, there is this recent concept of inference time compute, wherein models like Grok, if you go to Grok, there is this mode called thinking. Even on ChatGPT, it has come, on Claude, it has come.
Yeah.
So I think that people do not think enough about the problem in enough depth. They do not plan well enough. They do not plan horizontally enough. They do not plan for certain situations on, okay, man lo, if you take this one specific decision, what is going to happen after that? Maybe plan 5 steps ahead and maybe explore different possibilities. So to come back to my approach towards problem solving, it is that I sit down with actual pen and paper.
Okay.
I write down the problem so as to feel it. I need to feel that problem because most of the problems which I'm solving for these days, they are fundamentally customer problems.
Yes.
For us at
For you,
Neosapien.
yeah.
And more than anything, whether it being so as an engineer, I always have this urge or the itch to build something technologically which is cool and innovative and next level. But at the end of the day, as a startup, you have to focus on delivering value to your customers, right? And you have to, more than anything, you have to empathize with people, right? So I write down the problem, and then I explore that problem in that page. Okay, who are the stakeholders involved?
Alright.
Who will solve those problems?
Mm.
What are the blockers these stakeholders are facing?
Mm.
So it just comes down to the first principles thinking again and again. Why that problem is happening in the first place.
Okay.
For example, if I'm suggested by my engineer that okay, this system is breaking, that is why the problem is happening. I ask them, why is it breaking in the first place? Right?
Yeah,
When
makes
we
sense.
followed certain processes. Okay, if the processes were, let's just say the processes were not there in the first place, then we identify and do an RC, why were the processes not there? So the fundamental approach towards any problem solving remains simple, and this is what I've heard from my mentors as well. It just comes down to first principles and asking enough why to people. Why till the time you reach to the very core of it, and then you solve for it.
Nice.
So I just ask a lot of why and plan a lot and think a lot before doing anything.
That's problem solving. What about learning? What do you do to learn new things today?
So funnily enough, these days I do not really get the time to go to research papers, but from the very depth of my heart, I'm an AI researcher.
Okay.
I love reading these mathematical papers and understanding from scratch what were the mathematics involved behind these algorithms as such.
Yeah.
But since I do not have the time at the moment, what I have done is I have this, a different channel only on YouTube,
Okay.
which is dedicatedly, it's only meant for learning, right?
Oh, which one?
So there are n number of these channels. One is, it's called 2-minute papers.
Okay.
Another one is called Fireship.
Okay.
So there are these, there is this another channel called AI Explained.
Okay.
And of course, I'm subscribed to these, podcasts and all, like Lex Friedman and Dwarkesh Patel. So I just, one of the things which I'm personally interested in is new technology,
Yeah.
fundamentally. And so it doesn't feel like work really to be going through all these things. So YouTube at the moment stands off as my source of truth. So that is how I learn. And I go through a lot of these tutorial videos. For example, just a while back we were talking about Cursor and Windsurf and these IDs which are coming into play. I like exploring all these things. So I go through a lot of these tutorials and make quick POCs myself. So that remains to be my approach. Yes.
All right. So Zotero has been replaced with YouTube for you.
Correct. YouTube is my way to go about things. But given that, I do read a lot of books extensively as well, because I do think that there is no replacement of books.
Yeah.
Podcasts, YouTube videos, they cannot replace books. And why that is so is because books force you to focus.
Correct.
You cannot jump from one line to another unless and until you have understood the first line. Whereas you can watch an entire YouTube video without understanding anything.
I agree.
You can just zone out of things. So there are these 2 books which I'm recently reading. One of them, I think you would have heard of both. It's called The Hard Things About Hard Things.
Oh yeah. Every founder should read it.
Every founder should read it. I also got recommended by it by one of my mentors. So one of the important lessons I have learned from that book is that take care of people, product and profits in that order.
Very cool. Huh?
Because ultimately if profits were to happen, product has to be in place.
Yeah.
If product has to happen, your team has to be in place, to say the very least. And what I mean by that is your team is one entity, right? And think of your team like a body, like an individual. We are formed of different organs and cells. All of them have to work together. Same goes in the form of team itself. The culture is very important. I mean, personally, we at Neosapien, we optimize for more of culture than on skills. Of course, skills are important, but I think if you have the mindset, you can learn things quickly. But how you work together is very important.
I agree.
So that is one lesson which I have learned from this Hard Things About Hard Things. There is this another book. It's called Working Backwards. It's on Amazon.
Yeah, very good book.
Amazing. I just got to read a few chapters of that book. One of the important lessons I learned from that book, and which we are also implementing as we talk, is that you have to kind of be operationally excellent. like while I was talking about planning things, right,
Yeah.
and execution is equally as important. I would, if not more,
Yeah.
right? Of course, you plan things, but you have to make sure that whatever you have planned is happening with the highest standards of quality,
Yeah. Correct.
right? And the processes are not skipped, and then there is a certain level of discipline in the team to be following those processes.
Yeah.
So Amazon is where they are because of the processes and the customer centricity which they have. So these two books I'm reading at the moment. And yeah, of course, there is Buddhist literature,
That continues to be in your
which
life.
keeps me
All right.
sane.
Okay. What does your usual day look like, Aryan? Technical co-founder, CTO, you deal with hardware, people, software. Not many people have to do, hardware and software.
Yeah. So, I mean, building hardware is hard. It's just the saying, but that saying, I mean, after doing this startup, I've realized that this saying is just so true. It's like you're building two companies at the same time,
Yeah.
honestly.
Hmm.
So I'm spread across various domains. Like, of course, there is software, including mobile engineering in the back end. Then there is hardware side of things, firmware, and the AI engineering.
Correct.
Most of my time, so at different stages of your startup life cycle, your day looks different, your week looks different. Till about a few months back, I was deeply involved in coding out the core logic
Okay.
of our AI architecture. Right now, since our team has suddenly expanded,
Yeah.
and I'm just suddenly responsible for the performance of these people in my team and how they gel up together, it most of my time, I would say 60% is spent on just talking to people, understanding the problems which they are facing on a very fundamental level, and just helping them become a better version of themselves every passing day. Helping them, and I would not always tell them the solution, but I just want these people, these teammates who I have, to understand fundamentally where they are lacking, and develop that self-awareness. And I think that self-awareness is very important, because every time you cannot go and tell people
Yeah.
that this is where you are lacking. You have to also kind of groom and mentor your team. So most of it is just spent in talking to people. I would say 60% of it. Another thing which is very important in the stage at which we are in is hiring.
Yeah.
And I personally think it's the highest leverage activity you can do.
I agree. Building a good
Because
team.
if you, I mean, you would know, of course, you have built such big organizations. But yeah, if you get that one part wrong, then it can have this snowball effect in your organizations, which becomes
agree.
very hard to, kind of undo. So I spent around 1 to 2 hours every day, kind of like looking at resumes, just talking to people, potentially looking at new hires, and integrating people who we have recently hired into the team as such.
Yeah.
That is another part of my job. I think 1 hour every day, these days at least, I have started making sure that I actually do code.
Oh, very good.
Because I want to, more than anything, empathize with my developers. And I feel that as a technical co-founder, you should not be detached from the ground reality of things, of how things happen. And that empathy is, I realize it's very, very important, because I feel you can suddenly lose touch on how, software is made.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, one fine day, you kind of witness yourself putting this pressure on developers without empathizing, right? So as a leader, you have to kind of be in the roots. And for the way I do that is, again, like I talked to you about these tutorials I watch, I implement that. Even if they are POCs, it helps me understand better that the frustration which goes into the coding as such. So I make sure I spend 30 minutes to 1 hour every day just coding out POCs. And then, of course, around 1 to 2 hours I just spend on these YouTube videos, wherein I constantly just learn about what is new. Because again, watching founders like you on other podcasts, I have learned this one important thing which you should keep in mind, right? You always have to look at the corner ahead, right? And not
Yes.
just the state of the world which it isn't today, in order to plan better. So just being a more strategic thinker, I need to know the technologies which are coming and
Yeah.
integrate them as soon as possible into our workflows. If not in the company, at least personal workflows as such. So
Yeah,
yeah, there
makes
is
sense.
that.
So, this point about technology that is upcoming, you'll keep track of it. You started exactly when Gen AI was coined in a
Correct.
sense and just started getting hot.
Hmm.
How is that, and this is moving really, really fast, how has that changed your product?
Yeah. So, I mean, I would call it serendipity,
Okay.
how it just happened, because see, there are certain things in life on which you have control, but most things you do not have any control over. So I was watching this TED talk the other day, and it's a very old TED talk, around 10 years old back.
Okay.
So it just talks about the reasons why a startup succeeds, and one of those reasons has to do with the timing of
Oh
the
yeah,
idea.
correct.
For example, with respect to social media, there have been like MySpace and Orkut back in the day. Suddenly, Facebook came in. Of course, their product thinking was much better, is what I personally believe in,
Yeah.
compared to Orkut and other players. But they were just right with
Timing
respect to
was
the
right.
timing. Internet penetration has suddenly evolved.
Yes.
More people just had access to internet, so their distribution was taken care in one ways. Similarly, for us, what had worked out is that while I was involved in my previous startup, this was back in the day when GPT-2 and GPT-3
Yeah.
were there, and I was at that point of time they didn't even have their API access, so they had used to had their playground,
Okay.
and I was just playing around with this technology. And since my background is in AI, specifically R&D, I just knew it was about time. It just happens. And then, of course, I watched videos of these thought leaders in the world of AI. They just said that this is the year in which we are going to see massive improvement in terms of the pure reasoning these models are capable
Yeah.
of. And fundamentally, if the models can reason, you are basically commoditizing intelligence, and
Yeah.
it just unlocks infinite possibilities. So yeah, it just happened to be we just happened to be at the right time and the right place. I had just quit my previous startup, and I was looking to start this specific thing about on memory, solving this specific problem of memory. And then I pulled in my co-founder from Berlin. He was global team lead at Zalando back in the day at
Yeah.
Berlin. He has also always wanted to start his own venture. And why both of us wanted to do this thing is because you get to solve the problems which you are interested in.
Yeah.
And like Steve Jobs said, right, it's very important to be obsessed with what you are doing. Otherwise you cannot put the hard work in. And day in and day out we just realize how important hard work is, right? There is just no replacement of that. So again, coming back to the point of view, how our technology has evolved. So around when we started, the technology was capable of solving for making a chatbot.
Yeah,
Let's just
yeah.
say, right? And like I said, our vision was to make a Jarvis. And now thinking about what Jarvis is an a AI assistant which has infinite context, which can
Yeah.
remember everything about Tony
Correct.
Stark or Iron Man, and it can do things for Iron Man, right? Be it firing a rocket launcher, or maybe even calling an Uber for Iron Man, right? So back when we started, the models were capable of just acting like a chatbot. Didn't really have infinite context or memory.
Yeah.
So we thought, okay, we cannot wait for the world to be there in terms of solving for memory. So we started solving for memory ourselves back in the day. And how we started doing that was, again, thinking about first principles. I think it's going to get a little technical, but our viewers are
Why not?
technical.
Yeah.
So so back in the day, back in the day, I mean, 1 year, 1.5 years is back in the day in terms of how
Startup.
the
Yeah.
technology is evolving at the pace, right? But yeah, 1.5 years back, people were using vector databases in order to solve for memory. But the fundamental challenge with vector databases is that they cannot connect the dots between two pieces of information. They are just abstracted embeddings, and you do similarity search with what the user has asked. For example, if let's just say in case of what we are doing, let's just say if you take the transcripts, store it in a Google Doc, and store this entire content of Google Doc in a vector database, be it Pinecone, Qtrend, etc. And now suppose you ask a question about what have I talked to my team about app development? How this problem will, how this will work in case of just integrating vector database with a language model is there will be similarity search just on app development, right? Vectors which are similar to app develop, those chunks will be fetched and they will be retrieved and passed on. But what this will not solve for is basically connecting the dots between, okay, you are talking about app development. Where did this topic of app development even come into picture? Did product team highlight it? What was the communication with the product team about? What problems were customers highlighting, right? So fundamentally, vector databases could not connect these dots. And for us, that connection of dots, for example, in app development, who are the stakeholders? That is one form of connection. When did this project even start? What customer problems are related to this project? What business impact this project is going to cost us? How much of our monetary resource we are involving in this project? So in order to truly make an assistant which could actually act like a Jarvis, it needed to connect the dots between different pieces of information. So we ended up realizing sooner than later that knowledge graphs were the way to go about it. Because we had to store information in a way which was similar to how our brains store information. What I mean by that is a thought in your brain does not exist in silo. It cannot be just one thought. It had to be linked with another thought. Otherwise, that thought cannot be retrieved at all, right? Similarly, we recognize that one conversation has to be linked with another conversation and entities which were involved in that conversation. For example, participants is one of those entities. So we started exploring with knowledge graphs very early on, back in the day. We had made POCs and we also pushed it at our beta release. It worked significantly better than just having a vector database in place. So we evolved from there, and that kind of solved. I wouldn't say the problem of infinite context is solved yet. I don't think anyone has solved in the world right now. But again, you have to kind of solve for customer problems and not just generic infinite memory, right? So we have kind of mostly solved for the use cases which our customers would have with their second brain or AI assistant. Now coming to where we are at the moment, we are at a stage 2 of our development, which is making the assistant more agentic in the form of it being able to take actions on your behalf. So the
you
next,
already there?
it's there in our roadmap. We are getting there. We are integrating with certain tools, right? So the next few months, it kind of looks like integrating. So again, what we are building is a second brain, is what we call, right? And we have to integrate with various knowledge sources of the users. So we are integrating with your other note-taking app. For example, you were talking about Roam, right? There is Notion, there is Obsidian, there is your Google Drive, your mails. A lot of your personality is potentially there on Twitter, which we now called X as well, on LinkedIn. So to create a digital persona, a truly digital persona, we are integrating with all these knowledge bases. So once that happens, after that, we will be integrate. The next step for us is kind of opening our platform to developers to build on top of. Because we realize that as a lean and small company, we cannot build everything on our own. So what we will do is we will just provide this base platform wherein you have the information about a user. Now developers will be able to come in and build apps on top of it.
Okay.
For example, if you just want to book an Uber just by a voice command, right? Let's just say book an Uber to my home. Now we will expose that data to the developers. This is what the background of the user is. This is what they call as home. This is the location and so on. And they will build up integrations with apps like Uber, Zomato, and other platforms, so that we'll be able to interact with other apps as such. So that is where we are heading.
Did MCP come at the exact time? The timing is right again.
You are absolutely right.
Okay.
I mean, you are much more in top of with respect to the technology than a lot of people I have talked to in the recent past. So yeah, model context protocol, that is one thing which we are exploring. I have found that framework actually works as per the POCs.
Something had to be there.
Something has to be
MCP
there.
came first. I'm sure we'll have money standards, and then we'll have
Correct.
the too many standards problem.
Correct.
We'll see.
But ultimately, like, you would also, I'm not sure if you will align with this, but at any given point in time while you're building your technology, you have to make decisions which may or may not be a two-way door. Right? Let's just say we build on top of MCP. We have to kind of take that punt that community is forever going to support this protocol and that it is going to evolve into a much stable architecture. But yeah, we do believe that it has taken up significantly. It has been taken up significantly by the community.
Yeah.
And we, as of now, we are conducting POCs. But yeah, given that it goes all well, we might just integrate it in the dev and eventually the prod environment.
All right. Talking about prod and dev, what's the worst bug that you have shipped?
Oh my God. So it came from a fundamental flaw in the way in which we trained one of our ML models, right? And
This is a pre-training that you're talking
this was pre-training,
Okay.
right? So this was back in the day. We were just beta testing one of our features. So what we can fundamentally do at the moment is not just kind of understand the words which people are saying, but how people say different things, right? For understanding tonality of the
that
word.
tonality and emotion I
Yes.
heard on your Shark Tank pitch, and
Correct.
I thought, hey, this is different from what I use in
Correct.
current note takers.
Correct. So why that is so important for us is, in order to build a concrete digital persona of an individual, we also need to understand what triggers those individuals, what brings them joy in their lives, which people are the closest to them, what problems are they stressing with, what topics stress these individuals out. And in order to recognize that, we also need to understand deeply the emotions behind how people say different things, right? So we started training basically these voice, I wouldn't say just basically these emotion recognition models as a broad level term, on top of the tonality of the user. What we did was, it was a fundamental mishap which we did. We took a data set which was not built on top of the Indian consumer base.
Okay.
It mostly consisted of people from outside India. There were people of Indian demographic, but it was not a huge majority. That ended up kind of having this accuracy of recognition of tonality, because how people talk in Germany or how people express emotions in US, it's very different from how people express in India. For example, people might sound kind of, let's just say कुछ बोल दिया है दूसरे बंदे को कि हाँ चलता है, right? Even though in the words it may seem कि हाँ it's all positive and all good, but the guy was sarcastic, right? So that, fortunately, we only shipped it out to our beta users. They were like कि boss तुम्हारा model बोल रहा है कि I had anxiety during this conversation, whereas I did not feel anything as such.
Okay.
So yeah, that we ended up reverting back very fast. But what we ended up learning, and I think that is the most important thing out of all the experiments which you conduct. Things might go wrong in the dev environment or even in prod, but what is very important is that you learn something out of it and you don't repeat the same mistake twice.
Yeah.
What we ended up learning is, you have to be very scientific in terms of the experiments which you
Yes.
conduct. Very clear in terms of what outcome you are expecting, the data set, the input variable, the hyperparameters which are involved. And again, coming down to just thinking a lot more before doing things. So like that.
Because thinking is cheap.
Because because thinking is cheap, so think more.
All right. How do you decompress, Aryan, apart from reading Buddhist stuff, when you're done with your founder responsibility and being a CTO every day? What's your method?
So these days, so like I told you, mostly what I did back in college, I just played football and read books, and just there is this restaurant in our college, IIT Madras. It's called Zaitun. So we just used to hang out over there and just talk, right? But these days,
Mediterranean restaurant? Olives? No?
Yeah, Olives.
Okay.
Yeah, it was kind of Middle East kind of a place wherein you used to get. My mouth is getting watery while I speak about this. But you used to get this, Al-Faham chicken. You have Zaitun over here as well in Bangalore.
Yeah, Outer Ring Road.
Yes, in various places actually.
Oh,
They have
yeah, there is
multiple
one
outlets.
on Old Airport Road.
Yes,
too.
Old Airport Road as well.
Yeah.
So yeah. So yeah, back when I was in college, my way to go about it was I just used to play a lot of football. But these days, because of just the sheer amount of work which is involved, I have not been able to play recently. But what has been my personal lifesaver during this startup journey is how I breathe, to be
Is
honest.
it? Okay. Tell me more.
Yeah. So again, going back to basics and first principles, right? Why do you need decompression in the first place? You need decompression because your nervous system is overexcited because of some reason or another, right? And that is why you feel this anxiety, and that is why you feel that something is off, and because of which I need to relax or that I need to decompress in some way or the other. So how can you change the state of your nervous system from this overexcited state to something which is of the level of your parasympathetic nervous system, which is much more calmer, right? You can do that by breathing properly, because there have been a lot of studies published on this, that how you breathe, it changes how your nervous system acts and how excited it is. So for example, when you breathe very shallow from your chest, you get anxious, right? Versus if you're breathing from the belly and you're breathing slowly exhale and slowly out, your nervous system just fundamentally, it just calms down. And you can use the combination of this deep and shallow breathing and fast and slow breathing to change the state of your nervous system as you like it. For example, there is this breathwork is basically fundamentally pranayama from our yogic literature, right? And there is this specific technique called bhastrika. Bhastrika is basically breath of fire, wherein you must have seen Ramdev Baba.
Baba Ramdev, yes.
So he basically exhales very fast from his stomach and air flows out. So anyways, there are these n number of techniques which you can use to change your state of your mind. For example, if you want to become very focused, you can do that by breathing in a certain way, breathing fast. If you want to become calmer, you can breathe very deeply from your stomach and become calmer. You can combine these two and become energetic and calm, both. So to tell you an instance from my life, right? And it's a very funny incident which I still remember. So it was about, I would say, 3 years back, February of 2022. It was my birthday. And what ended up happening is that I, along with so back then I used to live in Mumbai. I, along with my friends, we decided to suddenly at 11 p.m. at night, we decided that, boss, let's go to Igatpuri.
Okay.
Are you
I
aware?
know Gatpuri, yeah.
Yes. So
I
we
thought this
ended up.
was popular for Vipassana at one
It
point.
is popular for Vipassana, but why we wanted to do that? We just wanted to take a ride, and just we were, of course, young folks, and we just wanted to go on a drive late night. So we ended up taking this Zoom car, and
Okay.
Igatpuri is like 2 hours ish, 3 hours ish away.
Mm.
I was the only one who was driving somehow, because other people were just too tired or just didn't feel like driving. What ended up happening, we went there and I was anyways exhausted from the entire day. When we went there, when we reached Igatpuri, it was already 2. And now we had to come back.
Yeah.
I was already tired. And, when on the way to Igatpuri, there are these mountains which you have to climb on top of.
Correct.
And then down. So when we were returning back, I felt very sleepy. And we were on the mountain and constantly there was no way to stop because the cars were just constantly in movement.
Yeah.
So it was like I could not have stopped that car. And that was kind of a situation in which we were almost in a situation that if I stop the car, it's going to cause an accident. And I cannot sleep also, right? And I cannot stop the car and give it to someone else.
Yeah.
So I just had to stay awake for these 2 hours and be very focused in the dark. So what helped me at that point of time is just breathing.
Okay.
I was constantly breathing very fast, and that's what kept me awake. And I don't know, if I didn't know that technique, maybe I would have closed my eyes even for a second, and that might have caused a big mishap. So yeah, I think meditation and breathwork, that still remain to be my way of decompressing.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So as I said, I did some social media stalking earlier. You were also the national silver medal winner for karate.
Yeah.
How does that thing play in your life? Did the breathwork come from karate? Just how does that play a role in your life now?
It's a very funny story because how I look at martial arts right now is very different from what my intention was to learn martial arts.
Was that anime inspired at that time?
Sorry?
Was the karate thing anime inspired at the time?
It was. So, I mean, I have always, wanted to be physically stronger. And I used to watch these animes back in the day when I was little. And of course, Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan, I used to watch these fighting movies. I was like, I want to be strong like these guys. These people can climb walls, they can kick these bad guys in one shot. I don't have to be afraid.
Punch man.
One punch, and not just one punch, maybe sometimes even a flick onto the forehead and people are just, so just wanted to be strong in one way, physically strong. Because I felt that if I was physically strong, I didn't have to fear anything. And, fear is the most fundamental emotion which a human can feel. On a day-to-day basis, you feel paranoid and fear more than anything you feel any other emotion, to be honest.
Okay, all right.
So yeah, I just wanted to be stronger. And my intention, it was not the most noblest intention. My intention back in the day when I was a kid, it was just to, fight people and beat them. And to look back at it, it was very innocent intention to start off with. Because I just, I wanted to feel physically stronger and superior. So that's why I ended up doing karate. And it was, my way of taking out all these emotions I was feeling and having karate as an outlet. But what karate taught me was self-discipline. My God, it was very hard. So this was back when I was like 7 or 8 years old.
You started very young.
I started very, very, very early. I got my black belt also very early back in the day. So I went to this karate camp in Pachmari. Pachmari is a hill station in MP. So I'm from MP. That's why. So I was the youngest in that camp.
Okay.
And I was made to do everything which adults were doing. Like people, there were teenagers of 15, 17 years old. There were also people in their mid 20s. There were also people in their mid 30s.
Okay.
I was running 20 kilometers with them at that age. So what I learned from doing karate is that this fundamental mindset that I do not give up. I do not give this option to myself to give up ever. That is the mindset. No matter how hard things get, it just comes down to this 1 second decision. Should I stop or should I keep going? And that 1 second decision is very important. And for me, and it's very important, that same learning I have inculcated in this startup as well. Of course, when you do startup, of course, a lot of startup founders who are watching this would agree that it's like almost every other day something is burning.
Yes.
It's chaos, and every once in a while you think, I mean, these thoughts just come. It's not like you think, but these thoughts just come into your head, like I said, right, autonomously, to quit. But yeah, I just don't give myself the option to do that at all. If I have promised myself I'm going to do this, no matter what happens, I'm going to do this. So this mindset of just not giving up and being resilient and being strong, I think that is the
Comes
most
from
important
that.
thing. And the most important mindset I have inculcated from karate.
Very nice.
Yeah.
I'll switch gears,
Yes,
talk
please.
more about Neosapien.
Yeah.
So unlike Alexa or Siri, you do not have trigger words. That means the device is sort of recording every time. What kind of optimizations you have done to say you're not burning the battery? In Shark Tank, you said 4 days battery life.
Correct.
Maybe it's more now. What kind of optimizations have you done there? Because battery, network, storage.
Correct.
You probably don't want to make a knowledge of noise. Or
Correct.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So in terms of battery, fundamentally the battery device, the battery of the device, it depends on two major parts. One has to do with the hardware itself, how you design the hardware and the hardware components. A lot of optimization can happen just by selecting a much better mic in a way, so as to call it, or let's just say a Bluetooth module, which consumes a lot more power. So you can have battery optimization by selecting perfect components, and of course you have to make trade-off in terms of, let's just say in case of mic, right? There can be a trade-off in terms of the sensitivity of the mic and the power it consumes, but it doesn't always have to be that trade-off. You have to, again, it comes down to research, right? Spending a lot of time in researching and finding out the best components for what you are trying to do, and it has to align with the use case. For example, it does not have to be an overkill, right? For example, if your use case does not really require your mic to be listening to a conversation which is 50 feet away, you don't have to optimize for that, right? So it comes down to, again, product-centric thinking, wherein you know what you want, and then from there on deciding upon the components which you have. That is on the hardware level of things. Once you have optimized on the hardware level, you optimize on the firmware. How the Bluetooth protocols are. For example, one of the optimizations which we have done is this voice activity detection or acoustic activity detection on the hardware side of things itself. So suppose if for certain X amount of duration there is no voice, we cut off the entire circuit. So that turns off the mic as well. So while we switch the mic from active mode to idle mode, and when there is this acoustic activity which is detected again, we wake up the entire circuit. That is one way of optimizing on the battery.
So this is decibel based.
Yes,
sort of.
it can be. Yes, it is decibel based. You can also run very small AI models on the edge itself, which can detect acoustic activity, right? Specifically human voice. It's just detection. We are not transcribing or anything on the edge as such. It's just detection that there is human activity. Those models are very small, and they can actually run on these ESP-based processors as well.
Very cool.
Yeah, so that has to do with battery. Now coming down to your question on the storage. What we do at the moment is we do not permanently store any form of audio at Aryan. That helps kill basically two birds with the same stone, so as to say. One is of the question about the storage itself and the infra cost involved with storage. Because we don't store, we don't have that cost which we incur. Second thing, it has to do with the privacy side of things. Because when one of the biggest questions which we face when while building Neosapien are the questions around privacy of user data. If you are recording all the time, what is happening to our audio? One of the things which give confidence to our users is that we do not store audio to begin with. Of course, that is not the entire solution to the problem of privacy. We have, of course, encrypted all our data. That is one part of it. Another side of things is that for us, privacy and security and data protection is not just a good to have kind of a thing. It is, for us, it's USP.
Yeah, correct.
Because it's confidential data which you're recording for people. So we have to communicate and build that kind of a confidence to the users that boss, your data is not going anywhere. For example, think about Apple. When you just use the word Apple, what emotions come into your mind is that my data is safe, my data is private, my data is secure. There are these big billboards in almost every city of Apple with just the lock icon. That's it, right? For them, for Apple also, privacy is a USP. That is what we are also building at the moment. And as we speak, we are getting audited by independent security and pen testing agencies to make sure that our data is extremely safe, secure, and no one, even internally, can have any form of access to that data.
Okay. So raw audio, I'm saying optimized audio is being transferred to your cloud.
Correct.
And then you're doing some kind of transcription and emotion detection there. And then you're converting into a knowledge graph.
Correct.
So this storage, tell me more about what kind of optimizations you've done there. Is there tokenization done right there? Very curious about.
So here is how the data flows, right, at the moment. The data flows from the device to your mobile phone app and from there to the cloud.
Okay.
Specifically, as of now, we are using WebSockets as connections to stream data to our backend. And from there, of course, you are right, we do some kind of transcriptions. But what are... So our IP is basically formulated by these n number of technologies coming together. And it's not just one thing which we do. It's the entire system architecture. And one of the important parts of that is that voice fingerprinting. What I mean by that is I can recognize who the user is. Why that is important is because unless and until you can recognize who the user is, how can you say what the user is feeling and what is important to them, how their thought process is evolving. Basically, it just unlocks much deeper insights into the psyche of the user if you can understand who the user is. So voice fingerprinting is one of the technologies, of course, not entirety of it which we have built in-house, but how we do voice fingerprinting, that part of algorithm which we have built in-house. So once you have these voice fingerprinted transcripts, we of course do chunking of those transcripts, and we do entity recognition from those transcripts. We recognize what topics have been talked about. For example, out of this conversation which we are having, entities can be Jeet, entities can be Aryan, podcast, Scalar, Neosapien, knowledge graphs, and so on. And on top of that, our proprietary technology is how do we store this data?
Correct,
Because ultimately, what we think is, I think you would also align on this, intelligence is commoditized. You have these open source models like DeepSeek from China, which are coming, which you can, host on your own prem. So that part is being commoditized. But how do you personalize these things? Fundamentally by data, right? And it also comes down to how do you store this data? And we store it in the data structure which we have IP'd upon. This data structure is of the knowledge graph. So how do we convert these raw transcript into this structured knowledge graph? And on top of this, we have a layer of vector embeddings as well. So we combine vector embeddings with knowledge graph in order to have this robust and accurate form of retrieval.
Yeah.
So that's
Okay.
that's what we do.
What's the typical latency between, say, I say something
Hmm.
and then it becomes available for me to query in my knowledge graph?
So it
And I'm
depends.
assuming it will continue to improve. But
Yes,
what is it
yes,
today?
yes. So typically, right now it's around 5 to 10 seconds. Now, of course, it's a range because
Yeah.
it depends on the context which is retrieved for that specific query which the user has asked. So latency, of course, would depend on how much data is there to be processed.
Correct.
And we have this intelligent routing mechanism in place which can recognize the type of query. For example, if I'm just asking about today, right, anything which has to do with today, that today's information is cached and it is stored in a different kind of a database altogether, not database as such, in a different form of storage, from where we can fetch the data very quickly,
Yeah.
versus we store long-term context in a separate different database as such. So there is, of course, these routing mechanisms in place which can reduce latencies.
Yeah.
But long story short, right now it's around 5 to 10 seconds on any type of query. And of course, we are working on, reducing that latency. But again, coming from product experience point of view, you would also see that with these latest AI assistants like Grok and Claude and Perplexity, they have these thinking mode,
Yes.
right? Now, because people want these models to think for longer.
Yeah.
They
It
are
is
fine with the
acceptable.
latency, actually, in a way. They are fine. I'm fine waiting for Perplexity to research about a specific topic for even 5 minutes. I can just prompt it and go out and, have my own cup of coffee or something and be back. And by then, it would have formulated a very in-depth research for me. So in future, we are going to have these deep think modes as well. But right now, to make things simpler, we just have one mode. And for that, the latency is 5 to 10 seconds.
Okay, cool. Okay. I have some more questions for you as a founder. What are the earliest days of the startup, and were there any moments of self-doubt? You have said this earlier.
So, me and Dhananjay, my co-founder, who is also my cousin, we started around 2 years back. Back then, we were building a platform, an app kind of a thing,
Okay.
which could help people, improve their communication better.
Okay.
Right?
This
And
is a very first version of
this
Neosapien.
this was very first version of Neosapien. Actually, back then we were called Begins.ai, and from there we pivoted to Neosapien.
It was AI
It
even
was
then.
AI,
Okay.
AI enabled only. Back then, we were just helping people understand how they communicate and how could they become better. But it was an app-first approach to things.
Okay.
Then why we pivoted to having a hardware is because, of course, like I said previously, right, form is as important as function. So if people had to go to their app to start and stop recording, we felt that we were not able to capture the natural way in which people speak things and what they talk about on a day-to-day basis. So if we were to do that, we of course needed to have a hardware. So that's how the journey of pivot happened. But yeah, coming down to your question, in the very early days of Neosapien, so what has evolved from there to now is this unshaken belief in myself and my co-founder and my team that will pull it off no matter what happens, and then that will keep going no matter what. In the very early days, of course, there is no traction.
Yeah.
There are doubts, but I personally, me and Dhananjay, we never had that self-doubt that were we good enough, or can we pull this off, can we not pull this off. We did have doubts in terms of the product which we are building and the problem which we are solving, the solution to the problem, the TG and so on. And I think those doubts are important to have. Because of course, when you build any startup or try to build any product, you start off with a hypothesis.
Yeah.
And the first layer of that hypothesis is who your TG is and the problem that TG is facing and so on. So we had doubts on was sahi problem solve kar rahe kya hum? Is this the TG? Is this the most important problem for this TG? Or is our solution, if the problem is important, is our solution feasible? Are they going to pay for this?
Yeah.
And so on. So there were doubts with respect to that, but no form of self-doubts and all as such. Of course, in the early days, it was just me and Dhananjay.
Yeah.
So, and we, of course, took risk to, he took risk to leave a very comfortable, high-paying job back there in the building and to have faith in me and to come from there to India, quitting everything. So stakes were high in a way. In a way, stakes were high because Murphy's law. If something has to go wrong, it will go wrong. And in the very start, a lot of things went wrong. I mean, we talked to a lot of people. We talked to startup founders in Dhananjay's network.
Yeah,
We talked to investors, and for months, we just kind of had this feedback from a lot of people that boss, this idea is not going to work out, right? And it kind of gets demotivating at times, right? Specifically in the early days, that people are constantly just criticizing, this is not right, that is not done. But one mindset which me and DJ had is that we just have to keep on talking to people, right? And we will learn things from these conversations. For example, one of those learnings, which of course I talked about just now, is the problem big enough? Is the solution correct? Right. So just this fundamental approach towards building a product or a startup as such. So this was hammered onto our head by a lot of these advisors who we have. And we, of course, had a lot of fight, me and Dhananjay, a lot of fight. Because back then, I had run out of money. We were, in the early days, Dhananjay was funding from his own, kind of savings. Eventually, we ran out of money altogether. Dhananjay ran out of money. I had no money. So I ended up having to shift from Mumbai, where I was living, to Bangalore. And me and Dhananjay, we stayed together in one home at one place so as to save on money, because like you have to be like cockroaches when you are building startup. You just have to be very hard to kill, right? So we are like, okay, we'll survive with whatever money we had, and we'll just keep learning, we'll just keep growing. And if we just stick into this game long enough, something or the other will happen. But yeah, it did get very exhausting to be in the same home with my co-founder Dhananjay. And the reason behind that is you are just too involved when you are in one place. Waking up, you are talking about work. While sleeping, you are talking about work. And I now realize, of course, at that point of time, that was important and that was needed, so we did that. But now I realize the importance of having a proper morning ritual and sleep ritual. Because, boss, you need to sleep properly. I keep telling my teammates this, boss, sleep. If you do not sleep, you are not recharged, and then you cannot think straight. It's like you have all these big dreams of building something huge, but then you are operating unoptimally. Doesn't make sense. So yeah, early days were chaotic. Chaos is even right now. It's just we have gotten used to that chaos.
Okay. Now, how do you sort of build for today and add customer value immediately, and then of course the industry that you're in, you have to also continuously innovate for future. How do you strike this balance today?
So one of the most important aspects to that is, like I've talked about earlier in this podcast, it's about knowing what is going on in the world. Unless you know, you cannot do anything about it. So that primary responsibility of knowing, I am the owner of that in our organization. I am responsible for understanding and being aware of the latest technological trends which are there. I spend around 15 minutes at least on a day-to-day basis exploring just GitHub repos. I go to GitHub and I see, okay, what is trending? For example, MCP I discovered on GitHub. There are other some of these cool repos which are popping up. For example, I came across this repo which could potentially replace most of 80% of our audio processing pipeline itself. Right? And it could just make things much more stable, right? So, you have to, now coming back to your question on how we keep on delivering customer value while parallelly...
You have to do both.
Parallelly doing that. So, how we do it right now is we have one owner for one task. There cannot be two owners for one task. We have made very sure that that is the case. So right now we have two backend engineers at our end. One is responsible for making sure that this transformation to new technology happens, and he pulls on other people as and when they are needed. For example, the other backend guy, his name is Shelton. One guy, his name is Hussein. So Shelton is more experienced in Go as a programming language. Hussein has more to do with Python.
Right.
And so, for example, let's just say Hussein is the owner of the new architecture which we are building. He will pull in Shelton as and when required, but dedicatedly only one guy will be the owner, and one he will focus on that one thing, while Shelton keeps on focusing on delivering the customer value. So yeah, striking that balance is, I would say, it is tricky, but given that you have alignment in the team, it happens.
Yeah, that's the beauty of small teams.
That is the beauty of small teams. I mean, that is one thing which, always we always want to keep our team as small and lean as possible, so as to avoid knowledge silos. Even in such a small team, there have been instances wherein silos were created, and we are trying hard so as to make sure that these knowledge silos are not created, and that we stay as lean as possible, because right now, because of due to the advancements of all these AI models and co-pilots and all, one guy can do the job of 10 people.
They
right?
can literally.
They can literally. It's just you have to know how to use these tools, and what should these tools be used for, right? And coding has become faster. It's just that, again, coming down to thinking. If you can think more, you can plan better, you can execute faster.
Correct.
So like that.
So coming back to your team and culture, you said this. How do you look at experimentation? What's your approach to experimentation and failure within Neosapien?
Planning experiments are very important. And these experiments have to be scientific in a way. For example, I would not say a lot of people do this, but I have seen people conducting experiments which are supposed to be scientific. By the terminology itself, experiments are supposed to be scientific, but people say that they have conducted certain experiments, but they are not scientific in a way that there are no test cases properly defined. There is no null hypothesis which is defined. Then there is no objective outcome, or that even if there is an objective outcome, there is no next step forward which are defined, right?
Okay.
Maybe in certain cases metrics are not defined. So what we started doing, of course, because these things, I have suddenly become a manager of people. Previously, I knew what was going on because I was the only one doing things. And now I realize that you have to kind of mentor people in certain ways and make sure that they know what they are doing before they do things. So now we have this very structured and approach of conducting experiments. We have this template, basically almost a template. And that template basically...
These are hyperparameter experiments that you're talking about, or these are...
Any kind of experiments as such, to be honest. Hyperparameter is one specific kind of experiment which we can do. But before doing an experiment, we make sure that every person in the team is doing something which delivers value to the customer. So even when they start doing this experiment, they have to create this kind of a small write-up or a doc. Doesn't have to be a proper doc, but a write-up saying, this is the customer problem which this experiment is aimed at solving. This is how I'm going to solve that problem. And for solving that problem, or at least to have an approach towards solving that problem, I'm going to conduct this experiment. And when I'm conducting this experiment, these are the test cases and the scenarios which I'm going to follow. And these are the metrics I'm going to track. For example, let's just say in the case of battery, right, there is some change on the firmware level. You cannot just say on the basis of feel, right, कि भाई मुझे लग रहा है battery improve हो गई है, right? It just talking about a very small experiment which we conducted. 2 different level of firmware versions. Is it done in a controlled environment? Right? Or was it not done in a controlled environment altogether? So you as a leader have to kind of make sure that the people in your team, they upskill, right? And upskilling doesn't really have to do with always technical upskilling in terms of, let's just say, a framework or something. It also has to do with the way they approach certain work which gets thrown in their way. For example, conducting experiments is one of the work. Sprint planning and sprint execution is one of the work. Debugging, how do you debug, is one of the work. I have seen people doing debugging in a very irrational way almost. Like they will go and they say they have debugged, but then what is the RCA? ठीक है boss, कर लिया RCA कर लिया, but अब इसके बाद में क्या करना है? So gradually we are realizing that these are the systematic problems which team was facing. For example, not conducting experiments scientifically is one systematic problems. Not debugging things in a first principles way and then having an approach towards solving, that is another systematic problem. So we as core team, we recognize what are these systematic problems which can be solved by having processes and systems in place. So that is how we go about that.
Cool. Okay. Tell me about sort of, we have talked about tech, we've talked about people, some processes, standard stuff. What has been most rewarding in this journey of Neosapien so far?
I think for people, right, anything which people do in their life, what they find most rewarding is what is delivering value to the community. People want to feel valued. People want to feel that they can deliver value to other people at the end of the day. For example, let's just talk about a very different scenario. Social media. You draw, you paint. Suppose there is an artist, right? He created an artwork and he posted that on social media. People liked that, people shared that, and he will feel good.
Yes.
Why will he feel good and he will feel satisfied? Is because he feels that he has delivered some value to the user. And in this case, the value is making other people feel emotions, some form of emotions. Maybe he has drawn an artwork which evokes a feeling of, let's just say, deep empathy towards another life form or towards another community, right? So at the end of the day, you want to feel valued by other people, and the way to feel value is to create value, right? So then again, what has been most rewarding is creating value towards our customers and towards our users, and building something which people can use and they can come back and say, boss, this has made my life easier. That has always, I mean, it kind of almost gives me goosebumps at times to realize that you have built something which is helping people out on a day-to-day basis, and I'm excited to kind of see where it goes, because again, because of all this paradigm shift, I feel that we as a company, we feel that every single one of us are going to have personal assistants, who will know us better than even most of our best friends, right? Who can support us in our careers, who can support us in our goals and decision making, and as such. For example, if let's just say a lot of youngsters today have this goal that they want to become fitter, they want to look good, right, and go do their gym and eat healthier. Why are people not able to follow through that? What if they had a coach who can guide and mentor them? So that essentially is what we are trying to create in the form of Neo / Jarvis, right? And to create something which can help people reach their full potential. I mean, that is the most rewarding thing which I can do in my life.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. Tell me something about yourself that people can't get from LinkedIn or your currently available digital persona.
Oh, that is a tricky one. Maybe one of those things can be the fact that I'm a deeply religious person. I because people who are there into technology, of course, by default, we are much more logical or rational, so as to say. And typically, rationality and religion and faith does not go hand in hand, and belief in God does not go hand in hand. So I think a lot of people would have this perception of me that I'm probably just pure Buddhist. My tattoo says and Buddhists do not believe in the idea of God, and neither do they believe in idea of self or Atma or soul or such thing. But I'm a deeply religious person. I pray daily, twice. I do japa, I do meditation, I pray to God. There have been instances over the past 1 year where I have cried in front of a murti, right? And I have rational and logical reasons to have this very strong belief. And one of those reasons, if I am to talk about, is fundamentally, even from Buddhist point of view, things are just interconnected. Nothing can exist in isolation. For example, not even a cell or an atom can exist in isolation. You would have heard these theories about the end of time, right? What happens at the end? It comes down to the second law of thermodynamics of entropy. Fundamentally, everything is going into disorder, right? And because that is happening, the universe is expanding. And at t equals close to infinity, t tending to infinity. The space between two atoms and even subatomic particles will be so much so that there will be nothing in perception as such, right? So universe came from almost nothing, created something out of nothing, and then went back to nothing. And all of this has to do with the fundamental theory of causation, right? One thing caused another. It's a chain reaction of events. So ultimately, it's all one and interconnected. Some people just call it the nature or the universe. I like the term God in place of nature or the universe because it gives me a sense of stability. Because since everything is changing, we as humans need something which is stable and unchanging in order to have some form of sanity in our lives. For some people, it is, people have this vision or meaning that I want to become the best, let's just say best AI engineer in the world or best sports person or so on. For them, that one singular goal, that one singular unchanging goal is gives them the sense of stability or sanity in their lives. For a lot of people, that unchanging thing is God, and for me, it stays like that. And I would say that belief in God is for me. I used to be very atheistic, by the way. So that is why so openly atheistic. So people close to me have seen this change in shifting from a pure hardcore atheist, wherein I used to criticize religion, criticized murti puja, criticized the rituals which we follow. At least I'm a Hindu, and I follow Vedanta. I used to openly criticize that, but the more in depth I went into these literature, the more I realize it's more of a meta religion in the sense that it fundamentally makes you question who you are, what reality is, and what is the relation between you as a person and the universe. And you end up realizing that it's all one and there is no difference, and that gives you a kind of peace in life.
Aryan, we've talked about books that have influenced you, some ideas that have influenced you. We've also looked at some YouTube. Are there any podcasts on YouTube apart from learning new stuff that have actually influenced you like these books and ideas have?
I mean, one of the most inspirational out of these podcasts, I'm not sure you would have heard of this guy, but his name is Chris Williamson.
No, I haven't.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
So Yeah, I mean, even I have discovered this guy recently. Basically, this guy, he gets a lot of these high performers in their respective fields
Okay.
onto his podcast, be it like ex-Navy SEALs
Mm-hmm.
or startup founders who are doing amazingly well, or ultra marathon athletes, or just ultra athletes in some sense, or psychologists and so on. I mean, that podcast is, in a way, single handedly helping me reframe certain things in my life. For example, just this thing about suffering, right? For example, there are people, let's just say, my age, right? I'm in my late 20s right now. Either there are people who are very ambitious,
Okay.
or there are people who do not want to, kind of put that hard work and, accomplish things in their life. If you look about it, in either situation, people are facing hardships.
Okay.
As a startup founder, or you don't have to be a startup founder, maybe you are doing something else in your life, maybe you are an athlete, basically you are basically working hard to achieve your goals. There is one part of that story. Another part of that story is about people who do not want to work hard. People are struggling in either of these ways, right? One of the podcast guests helped me reframe this, that life is suffering anyways. So choose the suffering which you want. And for me, it just happens to be the suffering in the direction of building something great and helping and providing people with massive value. So this form of reframing of things has helped me out. Another form, it just comes down to building my mindset, right? Because when you do anything, it just comes down to the mindset which you have. So this resilient mindset, this mindset of having compassion towards other people, and having this mindset of learning, you can basically learn anything from anyone, given that you listen to them deeply enough. Be it even a beggar out there on the street, there is something to learn. So all these, meta skills is what I focus on, other than all these tech things. Yeah.
All right. Cool.
So, yeah.
Cool. We'll do a quick rapid fire round.
Yeah.
I will save you the trouble of choosing between Shelton and Hussein. So I've changed some of my questions on the fly. I'll look at my iPad for these questions.
Done.
No, it depends. Okay.
Done.
Python or Java?
Python.
ChatGPT or Gemini?
ChatGPT.
Tabs or spaces?
Tabs.
You chose Go already. Okay. AWS or GCP?
AWS.
Hire for skill or culture?
Culture.
Technical debt, manage or rewrite?
Manage.
Build in-house or buy off the shelf?
In-house. Always.
MVP fast or perfect product?
Fast.
Okay. What is the first programming language?
C.
C. Very nice. Okay. Debugging or writing new code for you?
Debugging.
What's your biggest tech regret?
Not implementing the CI/CD pipeline early
Fast
enough.
enough. Okay.
Yeah.
Most overhyped tech trend?
Oh, I think the most overhyped is also the most useful. It's the AI agents.
Yeah.
People are right now fitting agents into everything which might not even need agents,
Okay.
or fitting language models into things which might just require a decision tree
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
such. So language models, not
Okay.
just agents. Yeah.
Or language models are
Transform.
good, but still.
Yeah, I mean,
Overhyped,
so people are just overfitting it in cases where it does not even, where it's not even needed. It's like basically, अगर nail hammer की जगह you are bringing an entire tope and firing it up.
All right.
Not
Cool.
needed.
Cool. Okay. Who are your go-to people for learning about deep learning? That's what you do a lot. And who do you follow on Twitter? And we talked about what papers. What papers do you recommend others to read?
Yeah, go to people about learning for deep learning. I think there are two most inspirational and humbling folks. I think you will also be aware about these guys. One is Andrew Wen.
Yeah.
who is the basically considered one of the fathers of deep learning, at least
Yeah.
teaching deep learning as
Yes.
such. I have learned more from him. I mean, the first course which I did on deep learning was by him on Coursera. I did that
Everybody has done the
specialization.
Coursera account, right?
Everyone who is into deep learning, if you have not done, I would highly recommend to do it.
Yeah.
Just have your basics in place. Andrew Wen has to be, I mean, not just the way in which he teaches things, I just love his aura. He is just so calming
Oh, yeah.
as a person, and just seems so wise. So I love listening to him. Another person who is equally as wise is Andres Karpathy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, very inspirational. I mean, he not only gives you strategic advice into building systems, but he goes into it into tactical side of things as
Correct.
well.
Yeah.
So one of the things which I learned from him is just that just keep building things, right? And by building things itself, you are going to have your theoretical understanding in place.
Yeah.
I think a lot of kids today, where they are going wrong is they spend a lot of times in learning and not enough time, enough amount of time in building. So yesterday only, so I posted about an internship opening
Okay.
at our startup for an ML engineer intern. One of the students, he reached out to me, and then that he is interested. In the next message which he sent about half an hour back is that he does not feel he has the skills to do it. I'm like, boss, why are you backing off even without trying? Right? Try to karo. So yeah, Andres Karpathy is definitely one. And then I have this, like I said, right, 2 minutes paper. And AI explained, there are these two folks who dive deep into the mathematics on how things are implemented in place. And so even if you don't have the time to read papers, you can go through their lectures. One of the earliest papers which I read, a lot of people today recommend going to Attention Is All You Need.
Yeah.
But I would suggest going even one step before. There was this paper on AlexNet.
Okay.
It was one of the foundational papers on deep learning as such. So if you can understand AlexNet, you will understand how neural networks work on a foundational level, on the mathematics level. So yeah.
All right. Cool. This came in 99, 2000, or this is the 2015 wave or the 2020 wave?
This came in 2010s around.
Okay.
So I think that paper, if I remember it correctly, forgive me if I don't remember it correctly, but Jeffrey Hinton, who is one of the godfathers of AI, I think he was also involved in writing that paper.
Very cool.
Yes.
Okay. Now, what's your advice for, we looked at your advice for interns.
Yeah.
What's your advice for engineers who are trying to now get into deep learning or Gen AI? I'm necessarily making a difference, separation there. What's your advice for these engineers? Everybody's getting into it anyway.
Correct. Everyone is getting into it anyways. My one advice would, I think it would be similar to the advice which I gave for the intern as such. And it's also because it's not just coming from me. It's coming from one of the most inspirational folks in AI, Andrej Karpathy, right? It's just that just build things and just create quick POCs. You will learn a lot more by exploring GitHub repos and implementing those GitHub repos than by watching other people do things on YouTube and learning from that. I would highly just recommend building things. And I think in the very start, do not focus on delivering customer value. Just focus on building things and having your concepts, technical concepts clear onto the very foundational level. For example, I have interviewed n number of people who have dealt with Gen AI, right? They do not understand the fundamental architecture of the transformers.
Oh, okay.
Yes, most of them do not. So I would highly recommend that you need to understand things on a very base level. Just do not just focus on integrating technology. Of course, that is an engineering effort, but focus more on why this is happening. Because you might, let's just say you are facing some bug in production or even in dev, doesn't matter what environment, you made something and you're facing a bug. It might not be a bug. Maybe it just has to do with performance is not as good as what you expect it to be. How do you fix that if you don't know the different parts of what you have built thoroughly? So understand the base which has created these abstractions, and you might not even have to use those abstractions. For example, LangChain is one of those abstractions frameworks which we have, which you can use to build AI agents. Cool, it's well enough. You cannot build everything from scratch, but at least understand the underlying mechanics of how embeddings are created, how similarity search is being done, how does it work on math level. That is what my recommendation would be for ML engineers as such.
All right. Okay, cool. This has been a great talk for me. I learned a lot. Thank you so much, Aryan.
Yeah, it was great speaking with you as well, because of course I have also watched your Scalar podcast.
Thank you.
One of the things which I personally liked from that podcast is that you have a lovely smile, first off. So I was looking forward to it, and it was great speaking with you as well. Of course, while speaking and during this podcast, it it was a recap for me on my own journey. And sometimes that recap is important, because you need to feel things, you need to feel those emotions, and I felt certain emotions on back from our early days, and why I started doing this thing and what our vision is. So the podcast was a great opportunity for me to kind of keep going and keep on delivering value to our users. So it was great.
I should say, right. All thanks to Scalar for making this possible.
Definitely.
Right.
Grateful for Scalar and also for the support which they have been providing us at Neosapien. One of the plugs for Scalar itself is that I love the culture which they are promoting among their students, because I keep interacting with students from the School of Technology and School of Business. Practical learning, which I see missing even in IITs. Of course, they're not complaining about the education at IIT, but practical learning is still missing in some form or the other. I like the fact that Scalar promotes a lot more practical learning as such, which is very important for the next gen.
Good. All right. Thank you so much again, Aryan.